Collaboration across countries and communities has proved crucial in the fight against COVID-19. Deputy Prime Minister Heng Keat says continued research and innovation in the global scientific community will be key to overcoming and building back better from the pandemic. Mr. Heng was speaking at the Global Young Scientists Summit.
We must build on the positive momentum of collaborations in the fight against COVID-19 and redouble our efforts to work in stronger partnership across disciplines, across borders, and across industries, academia, and governments. This will allow us to not only overcome this pandemic, but also other global challenges such as poverty, aging, and climate change.
And for more insight, joining us tonight is Mr. Robert Langer, founder of Moderna, who spoke at the opening plenary of the Global Young Scientists Summit earlier today. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Langer. Firstly, in the spirit of the summit, science is evolving very quickly. What's driving it, and what must young scientists do to keep pace?
Well, I think what's driving it is really the enormous progress that scientists are making all over the world in the biological sciences and in the material sciences area. And so we just keep seeing more and more of that. And I think for young scientists, I think it's still learning the basic fundamentals of biology and chemistry and physics and engineering. But I think it's also having an opportunity in many cases to work in between some of these disciplines, because a lot of the new discoveries are sometimes, and certainly the COVID vaccines are one of them, they involve a lot of different scientific areas.
Mr. Langer, the Moderna vaccine is one of 3 that Singapore is importing into the country, and Moderna is going to have to produce huge amounts of it for Singapore as well as for the rest of the world. So how is that being done?
Well, Moderna, so investors made a big investment in Moderna a number of years ago, and so we spent hundreds of millions of dollars to build a manufacturing plant, actually just outside Boston. So that's actually being used to develop a lot of the vaccines. And then Moderna is also collaborating with other companies like Lonza, which is a very good manufacturing company as well. So there's multiple things that Moderna has been doing to make as many vaccines as possible.
In COVID-19, an unprecedented pandemic, help us understand how vaccines have been able to get ready so much faster than previously, and should we be concerned about that?
Well, yeah, I think there's been really big scientific advances, and just classically the way vaccines had worked is that you take a virus and maybe make it less potent, maybe kill it, maybe do what's called attenuate it. And then lots of times people are using proteins and as the basis of a vaccine, and they're growing eggs, like for flu. But those often may take up to a year. And really the new advance is what's called messenger RNA. And so you could make a small amount of messenger RNA, inject it into the patient in what's called a nanoparticle that protects it and delivers it. And then the body is actually the manufacturing plant. There's a dogma that it's DNA makes RNA makes protein. So if you give the RNA to the body will then make the protein, which is the vaccine. And that's actually why some of these vaccines, including Moderna's, have been able to be made so quickly because of this really new scientific advance. In terms of danger, so far many people have been tested, and so far I don't think there have been really any significantly bad effects. And of course, the very positive thing is it's been something like 95% effective, which is really almost historic.
So you mentioned that figure, that almost 95% efficacy, and that's something, a piece of data that people look out for when we see the development of vaccines. Can you explain, perhaps in simple terms, just what that means? What about the other 6.5%?
Well, sure. So, it's actually, so a way to look at it is, let's say you gave everybody the vaccine. So, and then you saw and so half the people get a vaccine and half the people don't. So what that really means is, say that, just as an example, 900 people get COVID when they don't get the vaccine, and something like 50 get it when they the vaccine. So a tremendous number of less people, which means first it's going to be obviously less contagious by a lot. But also what's very important, it's not only the 95%. What happened in the Moderna trial is of all the people that did get COVID, 15,000 people roughly got injected with the vaccine. But of all those people, even though a small number did get COVID, nobody went to the hospital. So basically, it's not only a lot less people get it, but it's also not nearly as severe as it's been in these other cases. So that's really very, very important, that there were no hospitalizations, no deaths, no anything.
Mr. Langer, the cases have been rising around the world, in particular where you are in the United States. Are you confident that now that the vaccines are being made available, that they'll be able to reach the people that need them in time?
Well, I certainly hope so. I mean, of course, this goes something well beyond my own experience and even, the companies. This is something that the government's been trying to do. And I certainly hope everybody does as good a job as possible. But it's a whole different set of things. It's a logistical issue, rather than a science issue. I think Moderna and BioNTech and Pfizer and other companies, they've done an unbelievable job at making the vaccine. But now it comes into a whole new set of circumstances to distributing it. And that's a whole nother set of issues that I hope is handled well. It's early days, and I hope we do as well as possible.
A quick final question for you, Mr. Langer. I mean, we do know so far from trials that the vaccine, it works in preventing COVID-19. It is safe for use. But what about those who've perhaps already had COVID-19, and perhaps who have recovered from it? Should they still be immunized?
So, I should say, I'm not a clinician, but my understanding from clinicians and what's being recommended is that they should be immunized. I think what you want to do is make sure you have called high antibody titers for a long enough period of time. So the recommendations are that they should be immunized. Where they'll fall in line, I don't know whether that's totally clear yet, but the recommendations that I certainly have heard is that they should be immunized. They should get the vaccine.
Mr. Langer, thank you very much for joining us this evening and sharing these important insights with us. We've been speaking there to Robert Langer, founder of Moderna.